Jonathan Amos there, more of course online and all that. I just want to bring you the latest lines that we've been getting on the Ukraine story that we've been covering. Of course, the missile that killed 2 people on the Ukraine-Poland border. Last night there were fears about who had fired that and whether it was going to be an escalation. But we then saw President Biden, NATO and Poland all coming in saying that they believed that actually this was a Ukrainian missile which had been fired in defence after a huge Russian assault from the air. And it was an S-300 surface-to-air missile widely used throughout countries of the old Soviet Union, including Ukraine. Now, we've been hearing from our reporter on the ground in Kiev that President Zelensky is questioning that narrative. We'll bring you more in half an hour's time.
Now on BBC World News, the biggest African and international news stories. Focus on Africa.
Hello and welcome to Focus on Africa. I am Dingindaba Jonah Buyoya. Our top stories. With the links between biodiversity and climate change top of the agenda at today's COP27, we have a special look at the continent's priorities for the natural world. Host country Egypt's green credentials are called into question. The BBC finds evidence that the Red Sea's coral reefs are under threat from toxic wastewater being dumped in the sea. One man's mission to save Uganda's national symbol, the crested crane, from extinction as farming and climate change threatens their habitat. Also in the program, yes or no to unisex bathrooms? Over 70,000 people sign a petition against the introduction of gender-neutral toilets in South African schools. And in sports, we hear from Ghana's Inaki Williams about the Black Stars' chances at the World Cup. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from the BBC World News. In 2 days' time, COP27 draws closer. Today, delegates in Sharm el-Sheikh have been addressing the crucial issue of interdependency between the environment, biodiversity and human behavior. There is much talk about the role rainforests play in the planet's survival. But what about the rainforests of the ocean? Coral reefs cover only 0.2% of the ocean floor and yet are home to a quarter of the Earth's marine animals and plants. According to the United Nations, up to 50% of the world's coral reefs have already been destroyed through rising sea temperatures. Close to 1 billion people are dependent on them in some way or another. They matter. Egypt's Red Sea is home to 209 types of a truly unique species of coral that could play a key role in our future. Red Sea coral is tolerant to temperature rises and is the only species likely to survive into the next century. And yet, as hosts of the Climate Change Summit, an investigation by BBC News Arabic and the organization Source Material has revealed that pollution from an Egyptian oil facility is threatening its very survival. Nawal Al-Magafi reports. Now, have you heard about Sharon Ringle? She's only 12, an elementary school pupil from Tanzania and a climate change activist who has caught the attention of world leaders at COP27. At this young age, she has already set up her own foundation with the ambitious goal of planting 2 million trees in just 5 years and has been named a tourism ambassador in her own country. You can understand why, because Sharon is not shy to talk about climate issues with anyone, even with former US Vice President Al Gore or African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina. And she certainly wasn't shy to have a chat with our very own Peter Okoche at the conference in Egypt. Let's take a quick look at other stories making headlines across the rest of the world. Former US President Donald Trump has announced that he will run for the White House again in 2024. The 76-year-old would have to win the Republican Party's nomination, but others are expected to compete for it. Speaking in Florida, he said he would make sure President Biden did not get another 4 years in office. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says Tuesday's deadly missile strike in eastern Poland was probably caused by Ukraine's air defenses, adding it was not Ukraine's fault in trying to protect itself from Russian bombardment. Poland's President Andrzej Duda called it an unfortunate incident. The Kremlin has criticized the reaction of some Western leaders to the incident. Still to come, we'll have the sports. And as we go to the streets of Ghana to find out what Ghana football fans think of their squad going to Qatar. Welcome back to Focus on Africa. I'm Dingindaba Jonah Buyoya. Kenya has sent more peacekeepers to the Democratic Republic of Congo to bolster a contingent which are part of a regional initiative deployed over the weekend to stabilize its restive eastern region. The BBC's Richard Kagoy is embedded with them in Goma and sent support. Now, over 70,000 have signed a petition against plans by the South African Department of Basic Education to introduce unisex or gender-neutral toilets at the country's schools. A report leaked from the department also includes guidelines on the abolishment of gender-specific pronouns and changes to the curriculum. One opposition party, the NFP, says the government should rather focus on improving the country's education system. I am now joined by Atim Tongana, a Newsroom Africa reporter, to tell us more about this. Now, Ati, thank you so much for joining us. Well, I'd just like you to help us understand more about this bill. What else would you tell us about this? Thank you so much, Ati, for giving us that context on that very important story. Now, you're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sport. Not many black players have represented Athletic Bilbao, nor have many Baskets played for an African national team. But former Spain international Inaki Williams is bucking the trend as he stands on the verge of a World Cup debut with Ghana. The forward won his sole senior cap for the country of his birth in 2016. But with none since, a trip to the West African country earlier this year prompted a family-inspired change of allegiance. He has been speaking to BBC Sport Africa about Ghana's chances. And finally, before we go, you know that saying in the world of TV, never work with animals or children. Well, a Kenyan journalist recently found out for himself just how much truth there is in that. Alvin Kaunda was reporting from an elephant sanctuary. All was going well until he felt a nosy tap on his shoulder.
And provide a home.
Punked by a trunk. Speaking from experience, Alvin did really well to last that long. But there was one baby that wanted his fair share of attention, and why not when you're that cute? Feel free to get in touch with me on social media. Thank you for joining me.